that was my first experience with the imposter syndrome. Like, hey,
Yeah.
can I do this? Like, it's great to say you're a CEO. It's wonderful to say, hey, I own a business. But man, when you get in the middle of that, it's hard. And that was my first experience with the doom loop and the imposter syndrome.
John, today is our second episode of Escape the CEO Doom Loop podcast. How does it feel? You
That's
ready?
awesome. Yeah, I'm ready. Let's go. Number 2.
All right. Number 2. So as we discussed in number 1, we talked about the purpose of why Escape the Doom Loop and why you and I are doing this podcast and why you and I are CEO plus leadership team coaches.
Yep.
So today I thought we would talk more about really our purpose and what led us to become coaches and business coaches. And I'd really be interested in hearing more about your story. I've heard it before and parts of it. You and I had sat down on Marco Island in January for a nice breakfast. And I know you told me a lot about what helped inform you as a coach and what had inspired you partially become a coach, right? And
Yeah.
what your coaching method, I think, was really what I really took from that. And it was inspiring. You have a great story around that. You've actually sat in the seat. You've run companies. So tell us a little bit about that and how you evolved to be sitting in the seat in the corner office.
Yeah, it's a good question. And it's interesting. I was doing a session with a client yesterday, and one of the exercises that we did with a client was ask everybody in the room what was really their purpose or why do they exist? And a pretty powerful question. And when people think deeply about that, it's emotional for a lot of people. And for me, I knew my purpose. I don't think I was as clear about really what it was at my age now, but I grew up in family-owned businesses, and I grew up in the dry cleaning industry, and we had dry cleaners, and we had laundromats, and we had uniform rental and textile companies, and we had all this different stuff, and it was fascinating. I just learned so much about business, and I was 10 years old or 11 years old when I started working on a counter. My parents felt like I was somebody that was shy, and that's my nature, and they felt like, well, this kid's got to learn how to talk to somebody. So they put me on a counter at 10 or 11 every Saturday morning. I'd go with my dad to one of our stores, and he'd put me in an environment where I had to interface with people. And so I started learning really quickly about what it meant to deliver great customer experience and what bad customer experience looked like and how to lead and manage people and all that stuff. So I got to really learn that and understand that as a youngster. I kind of, going back to the purpose thing, I kind of even at that age started to realize that if I could help people, if I could lead them, if we could figure out where we're going and we could do something great and do something extraordinary, that really connected with me. It was just like, I love great coaches. Like I love great sports coaches. I love when they lead their team. It inspires me. It moves me. And so for me, I think as a young person, I really thought about, gosh, I would really love to be able to do that. Didn't know what that looked like. Didn't know how I'd get in that seat, but I just knew it really connected with me a lot. And so I think that was really a foundational thing for me really early, and it's really, I think, what I do today. And I had that kind of upbringing, growing up in family-owned businesses. We bought lots of companies. We sold lots of companies. We bought lots of real estate. I mean, just fascinating to be a part of that. I learned a ton about what to do, and I learned a ton what not to do as a part of being part of that business. My family did pretty well with that. I went away to college, and when I graduated from college, I thought I was going to come into family business, and my dad said, no. You know what, buddy, I love you, but you think you know a lot, and you need to go work for somebody else for a while before you get involved with your uncle and I. They had a fabulous partnership. It was just an amazing partnership between two guys, and I didn't get a chance to go work in a family business. And I went and sold software. I worked for a couple different software companies selling software back in the day, late 80s, early 90s. And it was a great experience. I learned a lot. I really learned a lot about selling through that process. But my first entree into being a leader was Lisa and I, my wife, got married and got back from our honeymoon. My dad calls and says, hey, I think we have an opportunity to buy 3 cleaners. Are you interested in getting involved with that? And for me, that was super exciting. And for Lisa, that was kind of like, what the heck are you talking about? Like her thought was, we got a couple of bucks for our wedding from gifts and stuff. And she really thought that, hey, we're going to go buy a house. And I thought, wow, this is a great opportunity for us to start our business life. And over a period of time, it's a couple of weeks now, we ended up buying those cleaners with my dad. It was something I did passively. It was every Saturday we went out to our stores and we put new computers into those businesses, which we never had computers or point of sale systems in any of our other stores. And we had 25, 26 stores in Southeast Michigan. We didn't have any of that except for the stores that I was involved in. And so we just started doing things pretty progressively. And it was a great experience. I learned a lot. It was an opportunity to turn our investment and grow that investment, and we did pretty good with that. And, it was my first opportunity to really lead people myself with my own money in something. It was a fascinating experience. I learned some things that worked. I learned some things that didn't work, and my dad was great. I mean, he was a great mentor to me in that environment, and he truly treated me as a partner. It was interesting, and I've said this to some of my clients like that maybe struggle with the parent-child relationship in a family-owned business, is that I didn't really struggle with that. And the reason why is that I was equal partners with my dad in that business.
I find that fascinating because I do find in many family businesses, you've probably seen this as well, but it's a legacy and it's passed down from family member to family member. And I think I've also seen in some family business, multi-generational, there's an entitlement mentality around that.
Yeah.
And so you're telling me that you actually co-invested, is it equally? With
Equally.
your father and your uncle?
Yeah, equally. So I don't remember what the structure of the deal was so long ago now, but yeah, I had to come up with my third of money to be partners with my dad and my uncle into that investment. So yeah, it wasn't a thing like they wrote a check and I came forward with my own money to be able to do that. And I think God at least allowed me to do that, and I was in a position to be able to do that. And so that was really the start of my entrepreneurship. And gosh, I'm so thankful that I was able to do that in that manner. Yeah, it was pretty unique.
I was curious, you've related a couple times about the ups and downs and the issues, even from when you said 9 years old
Yeah.
at the counter. Was
Yeah.
that right?
Yeah.
So, what were some of the issues that you witnessed at a young age in the family businesses that you think helped inform you as a leader later on?
It was all about people. If I look back on our journey in family business, it's not any different than the things that we talk to CEOs about today. It's really around getting the right people in place and making sure they know what success looks like, that they're clear about what they're accountable for, what the results are. And we had a lot of people work for us for a long time, and there was this loyalty that we built up to those people, and maybe to the point where it negatively affected the ability for the business to scale because we had people in positions of leadership and management that quite honestly weren't great people leaders. They were great at running a plant, they were great at cleaning clothes, they were great at driving a vehicle, repairing equipment, all those kind of things. But if you think about their ability to lead people effectively and create a great work environment, that was really inconsistent in our business. And you could see that from kind of store to store and how we performed. If you got the right people, everything just got a lot easier. And that loyalty is something that I see it with my clients today, that they have people to work with them for a long time, and there's this loyalty that they feel to those people. But oftentimes those people are really a negative effect on the culture. And for me, and I know you agree with this, culture is just everything. And if you have inconsistent culture, it creates resentment. Resentment creates frustration, irritation, lack of accountability, lack of cohesion. It just affects the ability for the organization to operate smoothly. So I experienced that. I went through a lot of that stuff as a young guy, and I would ask my dad these questions. This is before I was able to put money in. He says, hey, buddy, you know what? These are my people. You leave them alone. When it's your time and when you're in the seat, then we'll have a different conversation. But for now, this is the direction we're going to go. And so I just had to deal with those things because it was his company at that point. I was just a worker just like everybody else. So, yeah.
John, so going forward in the podcast, can I call you buddy?
Yeah, you can call me whatever you want.
Okay, so you bought in with your uncle and your father, and Lisa, your wife, was very supportive because you used the money from your wedding and keep working a 9 to 5, but you invested in yourselves in the business.
Yeah, we did that really early. So that was a great opportunity. It was a great investment. We did good with that. And then we had a family friend come to us and came to my dad and my uncle and said, we're looking at investment partners in a computer training company. And this is, 1995, something like that. And it was to invest in a startup computer training franchise. So my dad brought the business plan that was created and the investment memorandum and just all the stuff. One guy owned a staffing company, really sharp guys. They had a vision of investing in a training company, that being really specifically focused on technology. And they went and did a bunch of research. They really did a great job of bird dogging this thing and kind of figuring out what it would look like. And so they brought that opportunity to us. And over probably 90-day period, we looked at that opportunity and made a decision this was something we would want to invest in. My problem at that point is I had a couple of kids and did pretty good selling software, but not the point that I can make an additional investment, because I did have to buy a house to make an additional investment in another company. So my dad and uncle helped me in that situation. They bought me equity out of our dry cleaners, and I took that money and I invested that into a computer training franchise. So I was not active in the business at the start. I was actually selling technology still. And we had another gentleman that was running the company, and I learned a ton from this guy. He's a sharp guy. And he went about doing a startup. And about 6 or 8 months or 9 months after we started it, we made a decision as a board that I would start to get involved in the business and help running the sales organization. So my family made the investment, and at this point, I think we owned somewhere between 45 and 50% of the company. So we had a board meeting and made a decision I would get active in the business as kind of the director of sales, create the sales organization, which wasn't there. So started in that journey, putting the team in place. And what was really fascinating about that business investment is that we had 3 years of financial projections, and it was really my first experience with the things that we do today in our work, widget-based forecasting. So we knew exactly, our goals for how many people we want to have in a class, how many classes we were going to run, and how many we were going to do a week, and how many we were going to do a month, and what our average price would be, and our average margin would be. And it was really great stuff. The interesting thing is that we hit our 3-year projections, but none of the ways that we thought we did when the business plan was built. And the reason for that is we were late to market. So we thought that we were in time for the market, but there were other competitors that were in a position, and we just couldn't compete with them in what we considered the kind of general software trading space. And we realized really quickly that we just didn't have the infrastructure in place or the sales organization, the relationships. And so what we started to do, start to sell at high levels of large-scale companies that were migrating at that point to Microsoft technology. So Microsoft was starting to take over the world, and we actually decided that our pitch was going to be, hey, train your people in this new technology, because the PC revolution was here and there was all this disparate software and people trying to standardize on common platforms, and they need to train their people how to do that. And our pitch was, instead of going to 3 days of training, how about you go to a day of training, and we're going to customize our content around what are the things you need to do to be able to do your job effectively. So let's not send you to training for a bunch of stuff you're not going to use. So we did tons and tons of customized training, and that pitch really worked really well for us. And we ended up getting into things like doing ERP training. We got into PeopleSoft stuff, Oracle stuff, QAD, all these different high-end technologies these companies were using to run their companies. We got really good at that, and so we started building curriculum for that, developing content, delivering content, all that stuff from the business side. One of the key things that happened there is that the guy that actually put the business plan together and was operating as a CEO a year and a half or 2 years into it, and the majority of the franchises were acquired by a company that Larry Ellison and Michael Milken had put together. They were trying to acquire all the franchises across North America, and we were so new that it basically be like us giving our company to these guys. So we said no. And my partner at that point was ready to get out of the startup world and go be part of this organization that Milken and Larry Ellison acquired and go work there in their operations and IT organization. And we were at a point where the organization wasn't performing at the level we needed to. We were struggling financially. We were in a really bad cash flow position. And so we made a decision at that point that he would leave the organization and I would take over as a CEO or general manager at that point. So I was 31, I think, when I took over. And when he took over and we got real understanding of what was happening with our financial situation, it was a lot more dire than a couple weeks before. And our bank was concerned about our line and wanted to know what we were going to do to get our line in a good position, call that line in. And we were just really in trouble cash flow-wise. It was a huge exposure. And I remember as I became the CEO in October of 1997 thinking, I am a month away from losing all my investment. And I was a 31-year-old guy with 2 kids at home, and the doom loop got me. That was my first true experience with the doom loop, was in that moment. And man, I'll tell you, I didn't sleep for 2 weeks. It was really difficult. And then I prayed a lot about what the heck to do in the situation. I talked to a lot of people about it. I did not have a coach at that point. So I was kind of working through this on my own. And over that couple-week period, I finally just had this epiphany, and I just said, you know what, screw it. If I lose everything I have, I just have to go do it again. I just go start again. But to be in that doom loop for 24 hours a day for 2 weeks or 3 weeks was just one of the most difficult things that I had been through at that point in my life. And to this day, it's one of those most difficult things I had gone through. And it probably wasn't great to my family, and I wasn't great to the people that were working with me, and everything was really concerning. I was trying to do a workout with the bank and figure out how we're going to get ourselves in a position to keep the company solvent and viable. And we were lucky enough to be in a position that we were working on a big project with Daimler Chrysler Corporation at that point. It was the biggest project. We were over in the middle of it. And it was a $3 million project, and we were a couple of years in and never won a project that big. And in November of that year, December or something like that, we actually won that project. And in December of 1998, we won that contract through some great effort by our team with some really good people that did a great job. And they gave us a check for $1 million. And that check for $1 million was something that solved our cash flow issues. They didn't know we were in that kind of position. It's kind of crazy to think about it today. That $1 million really solved a lot of our problems, and we went on a run. So we operated that company from 98 to 2006. We did really well with that. In the end, we turned it around. All of our investors got a 500% return on their money. It wasn't without struggle. It wasn't without ups and downs. It wasn't without days being in the doom loop. But we got to the point in 2006 where our board really wanted to go in a different direction. I was the guy operating the company. Only person involved in the business from a board perspective was me. And I just didn't really feel like buying my other partners out. I felt like I wasn't sure where the business was going. And so we made a decision to get out and sell our contracts off and move in a different direction. So we did that in 2006. So it was a good ride. It was a really good ride. I learned a lot about leadership, and it was funny. I remember, I tell this story quite a bit, but I remember after becoming the CEO for the first time at 31, I remember standing in front of this group of people and telling them the direction we were going, and I was concerned about our direction. But I had to lead. My knees were knocking, and my voice was cracking. And in my head, as I'm trying to talk to everybody about where we're going, I'm like, holy moly, this is a lot of responsibility. All these people are dependent on me to lead this organization. This is how they're going to put a roof over their head. This is how they're going to pay for their kids' diapers. It was a tough moment. And I'm thinking about that as I'm talking. And I finally got to myself. I'm like, all right, get your stuff together. Everybody's looking at you to lead effectively. But it was one of those things as a leader. And one of the things that we talk about in our work, and I think a lot of our CEOs feel this way, that was my first experience with the imposter syndrome. Like, hey, can I do this? Like, it's great to say you're a CEO. It's wonderful to say, hey, I own a business. But man, when you get in the middle of that, it's hard. And that was my first experience with the doom loop and the imposter syndrome. And it was difficult. It was a difficult time. But we got through it and ended up being a great investment. Learned a ton through that. Had some phenomenal people that we were able to identify and bring into the organization that I was really proud to be able to work with them. And I'm so proud of the places that they've gone and the work that they've done since then. It's really fascinating, the impact that they've made. And I just really appreciate their partnership and help us figure out the business. So 2006, what am I going to do now? And actually one of my employees went to work for the Gallup organization and said, they're looking for senior level people to come in and run big client work for them. And so I actually interviewed with them and decided to go work for the Gallup organization. I was only there for a couple of years, but I will tell you, I work with some of the smartest people in the world. Their research and how they understood employee engagement and how engaged employees that are passionate about their leader that they work for and the organization that they work for. They're clear about what they do, how that really impacts the customer experience. So we did a lot of work really understanding how to create engaged employees and how engaged employees create engaged clients or customers. That work was fascinating work. And I was able to work with some really big organizations at the board level of $10, $15 billion companies. And so that was this whole nother journey to be able to go in and work with some just phenomenally smart people doing that kind of work and talking with them about really their people strategies. I use that work from Gallup every day with my clients today. Even I left there in 2008. And 15, 16, 17 years later, I still use that work with my clients on a daily basis. It was that powerful.
How did that feel for you coming off of you were an entrepreneurial family?
Yeah.
You were a business owner yourself. You invested your own money.
Yep.
You rose up to actually run a company, to lead a company, a significant size company.
Yeah.
And then to exit that and go to work for someone else, to be admittedly a very large and great company.
Yeah.
As you've described it, working with great people. But how did that feel to you to go from that responsibility of the CEO and admittedly proud, right? The ego of that. As you said, it's great to say you're a CEO. to then saying, hey, I work for Gallup?
Yeah, that was a hard transition. And I think it's the reason I was only there for a couple of years. I think one of the reasons I went there was I felt like I needed to take a breath. I needed to gather myself and not go immediately back in the fray and be on the firing line again to go run a company, finance a company, do all that stuff. And I looked at going to Gallup as an opportunity to do that, while also actually adding capability and tools on my toolbox is really the way that I looked at that. And it's like I worked at Blue Cross Blue Shield of Michigan, was one of my largest clients, and the opportunity to work with the CEO there and his team. I'm like, gosh, this is great stuff that I'm not running my own company anymore, and I had to take direction. That's hard when you run your own company before you grew up in family-owned business. It's hard. That was a hard transition. So that was a struggle for me. And I will tell you that I was at Gallup for probably 14 months. My entrepreneurial spirit started to pop up again. And I was thinking like, okay, I've learned a lot in 14 months, but I don't know that this is something I want to do for the long haul. And so I actually started to think about buy a company, start a company. I wasn't sure. And I went through the process of really starting to think about what were industries that were recession proof. But back in 2006, that's what I was thinking. And actually, I came up with kind of two things. I came up with a financial services market, and then my thought was people need good financial help in good times and maybe more in bad times. And the other side of it was healthcare. And my thought was those are the two tenets that when everything kind of falls apart, your health is super important. And you got to have a couple of bucks to pay your bills and get through it. And so I kind of boiled everything down to those. And so I did a bunch of research and different markets of things that I thought were going to be interesting. And I actually settled on healthcare, and I looked at a lot of things in healthcare. Finally settled upon getting involved in the home healthcare business. And so we would deliver skilled care was a premise, which was we have nurses and physical therapists, occupational therapists, speech therapists on our team. And we would be delivering care to individuals that were coming out of the hospital, and we would put our team in place to do that. And so went out and started doing just a bunch of research on the market. Didn't know anything about the market, just thought that it was going to be an interesting opportunity. And the reason for that was at that point, I think it was 8,000 or 10,000 people a day were becoming Medicare eligible, and people were living longer, but they needed care. So really looked hard at that. It took me 6 months to kind of figure out this is what we wanted to do. Started to think about forming like what were we going to do? We're going to buy a company, and that's what we ended up doing. How are we going to finance that? Who is the investment team we're going to put together to do that? We looked at a lot of different things. We cold called every home health care agency owner in Michigan to try to find an opportunity to buy a company, and got to the opportunity where we had good conversations with owners about, and finally made a decision. We found the right company, bought that company. It had all the kind of the foundation in place that we needed. And our strategy at that point was that we wanted to take your sickest patients, the patients that were coming out of hospital environments, and that we were going to invest heavily in technology and clinical protocols to be able to keep people at home. That was our foundation of our premise of what we were trying to do with that business. So put an investment group together, had a partner that was active in the business with me, bought that company, and a couple weeks into that, I started to realize that, gosh, this is different than my last go around where I had partners, but those relationships, although not perfect all the time, it went pretty well. This was different pretty quickly, not because anyone was a bad person or just thought about things differently, maybe at different points in their life and wanted different things from their investment, probably pretty quickly and pretty differently. And partnerships are hard, right? Partnerships evolve and change, and they can evolve and change really quickly. And that happened for us. And it was really my first time where I thought I had been in Vistage and when I was running my last company, and that was a great experience, and had my first kind of coach in Vistage, but not coaching at the level of CEOs and their teams today. And I realized pretty quickly in the middle of that opportunity, we needed some outside help. So we went and talked to a couple different guys. They came and did a little work with us. And a guy named Mike actually became a game changer for me personally from a coaching perspective. But I think the trust of our investor group came in to help us really figure out where we're going with the organization, work with us over a couple of year period of time. And we bought that company in 2008. It grew, but lack of alignment at the ownership level about what we were going to do, who was going to manage teams, just all the stuff that happens with lack of clarity and alignment at the top. And Mike did his best to help us get alignment with that. It just wasn't going to go anywhere. And it wasn't get to where we wanted to get to. And we had done all the widget-based forecasting and modeling, and we had all that stuff. It was great. But after 4.5 years of doing that, it just got to the point where it wasn't going directionally in the right way. and tried to buy my partners out. That wasn't going to work out. And I finally just made a decision that I can make more money, but I can't make more time. Decided to sell my equity out and then actually go join another friend that had started a staffing company 10 years before and needed to start a healthcare division. And so I went and did that. So I sold my equity. I took a huge haircut. I lost a bunch of money on that one. Didn't go great. I will tell you that I learned more about that. I don't know if failure is not the right word. I don't think about it as a failure, but that learning impacted my ability to do more of what I do today than my previous two successes, for sure. It was just amazing, that journey. So I did that for 4.5 years and then decided to go join a buddy that had started the company 10 years before, that he and I had been noodling around 10 years before, and he got this thing going and was at a point where his clients were asking him to get into the healthcare world from a healthcare staffing world. And I knew healthcare pretty intimately after being in it for 4.5 years, and his big clients were big health insurance companies across the country, and I'd worked there with Gallup, so I knew a lot about that industry. So I'm like, yeah, you know what, let's go do this. That was actually a reprieve too. Being in the middle of a tough partnership for 4.5 years, I felt like I needed to gather myself again, right? I mean, it's hard, right? It's really hard. I had to gather myself
Pick
again.
yourself up, dust yourself off.
Yeah, right. So I went and did that. I ended up running the company after a couple of years, and it just learned again a ton. Actually brought my coach into that organization. Mike brought him in there too, because I felt like we needed coaching and direction and consistency. And one of the things that I thought coaching brought to me as a president of that company was I'm too close to it. And there was such value in having somebody that had our back. The CEO, I was operating as a president and the CEO. Somebody had our back, but also somebody that would really challenge me.
Yeah.
And Mike did that a lot.
Yeah.
I remember Mike saying to me, you just really love your ideas, don't you? And I'm like, what do you mean? He says, you just sound like a complete jerk at some of these meetings. He says, is that the way you want to sound? And I'm like, I don't want to sound that way. I didn't know that I do. He says, yeah, John. He says, you do all the talking. You got to shut up and you got to let your people talk. And so we would use him to facilitate conversation where I was now a participant in the room versus a guy leading the room.
Yes.
Right? All of that.
It's hit a topic that's come up a couple times recently with CEOs and a new client and obviously potential clients of, well, I self-facilitate. I lead our sessions.
Yeah.
And I actually have no one like, oh, I could do what you do.
Yeah.
Like you could, but then who's going to run your business? Because you cannot be, right, go to the sports analogy. You can't be, the coach on the sideline does not go out of the field to play the game.
Yeah,
right?
no.
They're two different roles. You can't play the game and coach the game.
Yeah. No, I think it's great. I think you're too close to it, and then you get people that can't be truly transparent with you. What we do in our work today is we pull the truth out. We go ask a lot of hard questions that maybe make people uncomfortable from time to time. But the reality is we got to talk about that stuff, because if we don't uncover the real issues, we're just not helping these organizations make the right decisions and then put the right priority in place about what are the things that they should be doing. And I was guilty of that, and I was a guy that before I had Mike involved, like I was a guy that had 70 initiatives in a year. Literally, I had like 70 things I wanted to get done. And I had my leadership team of, I don't even know what it was anymore, 5 or 6 people. And 2 people would say, if I said 70 initiatives, they're like, yeah, let's do 70. And they have 2 that were like, what the hell are you talking about? And they had 2 that were in the middle, like, can we do 70 or not? Like there was no alignment, no cohesion, nobody challenged. It was just a completely wrong approach. And so he was super helpful with me and challenging me. And there were days, again, in all of these journeys, but in all these different experiences where, man, I was in the middle of the doom loop and I was suffering from imposter syndrome and all of this stuff. Can I do this? Can I lead this healthcare company? Can I deal with this board? Like, I don't know if I have the tools to be able to do this effectively. Right. And I'm not sleeping at night and it's affecting my family. I'm like, hey, I need some help, Mike. And then when I took them with me in the staffing company, man, we talked all the time. And it's just like, there were days that I was like, I want to walk off the plank and jump in the water and the shark infested water. I just want to get out. I just can't take it anymore. He said, no, you're all right. Let's talk through what are the issues, little real issues you're dealing with. He says, you're thinking the right thing. Like, what action do you have to take? Man, it's just so valuable. It was unbelievably valuable for me. And I was at that healthcare company. That's
incredible.
Yeah, I was at the healthcare company for about 5 years. And Mike had said to me, have you thought about doing what I do? And I said, I have, but I thought it'd be my retirement strategy. And I was 51 or 52. I haven't thought about doing it now. He says, I think you should. And he gave me a couple of guys that were doing this kind of work. They had started a little coaching firm. They had 5 or 6 coaches. They had a methodology that was hatched out of the EOS stuff with Wickman. They were partners and they separated. And so they created this methodology called execution
Imagine
maximizer.
that.
Yeah. So I decided to get certified in that
Okay.
methodology while I was still working at this other place. I had a couple of buddies that had a company that they had grown the company, and I introduced to them what I was doing. And I said, "Would you guys be open to this kind of stuff? I think I'm going to try to do this full time." They're like, "Yeah, this is interesting. I think we could use the help." And so I went and did this little session that we called a tune-up. It was a half-day session. And I said, "Okay, let's work with your leadership team." So, well, who's that? And they weren't sure. And this was a decent-sized company, right? This is a $40, $50 million company at the time. And I said, "Will you bring who you think's on your leadership team?" They weren't sure. So they show up with 13 or 14 people. I did that day of work, was still doing the other thing. At the end of the day, I was like, I got to go do this full time. Like, this is my calling. Like, I can use all the stuff I've learned, all the stuff I've failed at, all the getting kicked in the teeth. I can help people avoid that. And I just made a decision. I came home that night, I'll forget it. And I told Lisa, I said, I think I have to go do this. She says, what do you mean? I said, I think I have to quit doing what I'm doing right now. I was doing okay, making a decent buck. And I think I have to quit what I'm doing right now. I think I have to go do this. And she says, well, what do you mean? We don't have any money coming in. Then I said, I know, but I don't know how to half do this thing. Like, I think I have to go do this. And she's like, I need you to think about this. She's been great. She's supported me in all this crazy stuff. It's crazy, I'm sure, being married to me and all the stuff I've pulled her into and taken her through that. She's just always been there for me. I made a decision in 2018, and I just said, you know what? We're going to go do this. And I engaged with my friends. They needed the help. And I just went out and started building a coaching practice. And it was really kind of the culmination. And I just making a payroll like that. How do you make a payroll thing? Like, there's just nothing like it. If you haven't done it, I just think it's like one of the most impactful things, and all the people issues that you have to deal with. And just there's so much stuff. And I worked with the guys at Execution Maximizer for a couple of years, and then I stumbled across Shannon Susko. I had a conversation with Shannon. I think she was at her place in Nova Scotia. Is it Nova Scotia where her place is at? Right?
Yes, it is. Yeah.
I remember having a conversation with her. I'm like, I think I have to go do this, because the things that she was doing in strategy, which I really felt like most companies don't have a strategy. Most small and mid-sized companies, and I'm talking like even $300-400 million companies, I don't know if they really have a strategy. And I just thought, like, gosh, if we could really help companies figure out what's the strategy, like, where do we compete, what do we do, what don't we do, and then help them build great teams, and then help them execute consistently, and all the things that we do, it was like a no-brainer for me. And so it's just been a great opportunity to be part of a great framework and meet people like yourself and the other coaches that we work with. It's just unbelievable. Yeah. It's a great opportunity.
Definitely. It's so true, John. So many of the things that you've touched on during the story. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for being very vulnerable about it as well.
Yeah.
And you've touched on a lot of the topics that you and I see in our coaching with CEOs, and being able to hear your story and how you reflected back and been open about sharing when you were in the doom loop, which is really that as a CEO of that sense of despair and in the things and desperation that we do. And yes, it's great to say I'm a CEO and there's all the things that come with that. But you really touched on something, and that's the responsibility for looking out at your team, no matter how large or how small, and knowing that the sense of their livelihoods and their families' livelihoods is resting on your shoulders, and that ability to make payroll. I've heard too many CEOs share about how they've lost homes because their business failed, and how they couldn't make payroll, or how they didn't know, woke up at 3 a.m. and said, oh shit, I don't know how I'm going to make payroll this Friday.
Yeah.
Right. You're laughing.
I've been there.
You've been there.
I've been there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I really liked the example of how those painful lessons were the ones, and the most expensive maybe were the ones you learned the most from.
Super expensive. Yeah. It cost me. I don't even want to know. I try to avoid it all. I try to like compartmentalize and not think about that anymore. But it is. You just learn a lot through those failures, and I wouldn't change any of it. Like I told Shannon that we were talking in a podcast about a year ago. I'm like, it sucked. It was horrible going through it, and it cost me a ton of money. But looking back on it now, I wouldn't change any of it, because I just don't know that I could be doing what I'm doing right now and help my clients as much as if I didn't go through that really difficult time. And it was years. It was 3-4 years of just, what the heck where's this going? What am I going to do? How am I going to take care of my kids? I'm going to put my kids through college, like all that stuff, man. It was hard.
I really like how you brought it home in terms of what you and I and Shannon and our whole coaching organization, what we do, and the people, there's many more outside of that who do what we do.
Yeah.
And that's a sense of purpose that's fueled by our frustration and our understanding of the responsibility, the loneliness. And I think what makes us unique among many who call themselves coaches is that we've been in that seat. We've had those sleepless nights. We've had those 24 hours end on end of being in the CEO doom loop, the downward spiral. That's a dark, dark place.
Yeah.
And to be able to, as you said, learn those lessons and then now be able to help others.
Yeah.
And certainly everybody's got to take their lumps to learn.
Yeah.
But I always feel if we can help them transition through those times a little faster, challenge them and give them the right questions, that they come up with the ideas that lead to action, that they take action and do it, because we all can.
Yeah, it's funny. Like, I think one of the things that occurs or happens is that we have this process that we use, this foundation of metronomics, and there's a structure to what we do, and it's really laid out very clearly over a 3-year period. But I'll tell you, there have been times I go into a meeting and I have a clear agenda what we're going to work on, and we get into the meeting, I'm like, we can't scrap on all of this. Like, there are other more important things. Like, this guy's worried, or gal's worried about making payroll. They're not worried about 3 years from now. They're worried about 90 days from now. What are the things that we have to do right now? What hard decisions do we have to make right now to get the organization in a position that we can worry about 3 years from now? And so that happens, right? And I think that, I think you're right. I think just having sat in that seat, there's just a sensitivity and a feeling like, okay, we're going to go in these meetings. Here's what we do. Here's how we do it. And we do all that foundational stuff every time. But there are meetings I've had where we get audible. Like, we got to go in a different direction because, you know what? The things that we thought last week, and things change really quickly. So last week we're going to run our standard meeting, and we're going to do the standard stuff we do. This week the sky's falling. Like, we got to be like a quarterback of a football team. We got to audible and come up with a different play because this isn't working right now. And so I think that you're right. I think that because we've been there, we sat in that CEO seat, and we've been through that doom loop. We've been in the doom loop and the despair that comes with that. And how the heck are we going to finance this and cash flow and all that stuff? I just think it helps a lot.
Yeah, absolutely agree. All right, John. Well, I think that's a wrap on our podcast number 2. Thank you for sharing your story, your CEO story and journey, and then into coaching. So our next podcast episode, number 3, I'll share my story, and hopefully I can be equally as vulnerable and share some lessons there. So I'm
looking forward to it. Yeah, that'll be awesome. I'm looking forward to it. I'm sure it'll be awesome to hear and experience what you went through, for sure.
All right, John. All right, we'll talk to you then. Take care.
See ya.